In a world filled with sharks, bears, and killer bees, one man is brave enough to stay indoors to bring you the latest in gaming, movie, and pop culture news. That man is Tom Awesome, and this is the Outside is Overrated podcast.
Hello and welcome to Outside is Overrated Game Club. Today we're starting our discussion of Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon by From Software. I'm your magnanimous host, Tom Sedlacek, and joining me for the discussion tonight are Munch Time, John Munch.
Let's cook. Let's go.
And Dr. B, Brian Camille.
Hey, everybody.
Brian, you're already laughing. Like, that wasn't that interesting of an intro. Like, you just
No,
excited to
it's
be
just
here or what?
John is using young people slang, and like when you have as much gray as we do, it just looks wrong.
Well, to be fair, two counterpoints there. Brian, I don't see any gray on you. You look fantastic, my dude. And John doesn't have any hair. So, like, what's gray on him? Like, are you looking at his butt hair or what?
He's got that tuft of chest hair that always pokes out. I mean, I've known John since we were like 18, 19. This man can grow hair like no one you know. Like Sasquatch is like, damn, look at the chest thatch on that man.
Except on my head, right? So shave it off because it's easier that way. My beard is gray.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember when we were going to have a hair off between John and another friend, but that didn't exactly happen. By the way, I missed somebody. We're also having Patreon supporter Mike Mathwig on the show.
Good afternoon, evening / hello.
Howdy. Outside is Overrated is presented by Premier Health. Check out their website at premierhealthmn.com. That's premierhealthmn.com. MN is in Minnesota. In this monthly standalone segment in your OiO podcast feed, we play a game with our community. Then we invite our Patreon supporters to join in on a discussion about the game. If you want to join in, support Outside is Overrated on Patreon at patreon.com/OiO. You can help for as little as $2 a month. So I'm going to start by setting expectations for what we're going to cover in this episode. We're going to discuss exactly what is Armored Core. We're going to go over build tips for noobs. We're going to explain our thoughts on the story so far. We're going to cough here and there and turn away from the microphone, and then we're going to talk about how this game stacks up against other FromSoft titles. This game released in August 2023, and it has a Metacritic rating of 86. Now, the core gameplay loop in Armored Core 6, and Mike, you missed it in the open, but I actually said Fires of Rubicon, not of the Rubicon.
Congratulations, you're making progress.
Yeah, I can read words now. So the core gameplay loop for Armored Core, you go on a mission, you blast some mechs, you earn some cash, you tinker with your build and your loadout, then you get super frustrated by a handful of nigh unbeatable bosses, and then you put it down for a while, you come back and try again another day. So did I summarize that core experience pretty well?
Perfect.
Yeah, nailed it. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is a high-speed mecha action game by From Software where players pilot customizable combat mechs in a war over a mysterious energy source called Coral. It features intense battles, deep mech customization, and fast-paced movement, blending challenging boss fights with tactical decision-making. This game retains the series' mission-based structure while incorporating modernized controls and design philosophies from Software's recent titles. Brian, we'll start with you. You tend to run hot or cold on FromSoft games, as we've discussed on the show. Which side of the fence is this game on for you?
This one's running hot, and it's the fight that I have with FromSoft is that their dedication to creating a labor of love is obviously there. They put so much effort into making these games, but it's some of the decision making that FromSoft makes that is always like mind blowing to me. You guys know well my complaint about the first level of Bloodborne, right? I beat the game, but that first level almost ruined it for me. Honest to God, the first level of this one, they have you go through, blow up a bunch of things in your opening mission. The opening boss of this game, I died to more times than any other boss. I am halfway through Chapter 4. I have not had to fight a single boss more than maybe 3 times outside of that first boss.
Okay, so when you say first boss, you mean that helicopter at the end of the very first mission. Is that correct? Or do you mean Beltreus at the
Yes.
end of chapter
no,
one.
I mean the helicopter. I died probably 7, 8, 9 times to that helicopter. It took me forever to figure it out because what I realized, the helicopter at times was moving behind an invisible barrier that I couldn't get through, and I realized, okay, I can't get to it, but it'll sit behind the barrier and light me up. So that's on me. But the part that is so insanely stupid to me is that after you beat mission 1, it opens up the tutorial in the main menu of how to play the game. FromSoft, why do we do this? You keep doing this? Why? It's just so dumb. That said, I've been loving it. The speed of the game's been fun. The bosses are oversized. I honest to God, I've not had to fight a boss more than maybe like 2 or 3 times besides that. Like the Belarus or whatever that guy is with 1,000,000 bombs, I beat him on my 3rd try.
What? No.
But
Wait, stop right there. I know John wants to make a point, but like, you died to the helicopter like 7 times, and like, I get that. Like, first time walking in this game, it's like, that fight is hard. But then, Baltreus at the end of Act 1, like, he is a nightmare from like another dimension that you have to fight. You beat him on the 3rd try. I call BS, Brian.
Yeah. No, one thing that I want, because when I was first playing the game, a couple of things that had popped up that were a little bit weird was, like, I was telling John, I kept boosting accidentally into enemies. And I didn't think I was pressing R3, but John's like, no, you are, that's the problem. Or L3, I think, John, is what the problem was. So I wound up switching L3 and circle to make it so that I didn't have to do that anymore. And I watched a video on how to break enemy locks, just to like understand, okay, well, how does the locking system in this game work? I just wanted to learn. And once I learned that, there's kind of certain ways that you can move where you can kind of repeatedly break the game's lock. And with him, as long as you keep breaking it, you can avoid most of those missiles. So I wound up doing a double SMG close build where I just stayed close to him and did really, really intense close quarters combat. And he died in my 3rd attempt. I beat that flaming bulldozer thing on my 1st one. And I played terribly. I just got above it and shot down, and eventually it died. So I think some of it is luck, but with him, it was just staying close and kind of learning about how that lock system works. But the speed of it, the fluidity of it, once I changed those controls just a little bit, you guys, this has been so much fun. And I love playing a game with little short single missions. Isn't that awesome?
It's pretty good. I'm not done with you yet, Brian. We're gonna go back and forth here a little bit more. So, like, I boost into enemies all the time too. Constant source of frustration. It's like I break my own lock by boosting when I don't intend to. I put myself into harm's way. I'm gonna have to try
L3.
that. I almost never remap controls, but that sounds like a great idea.
It will help. So if you hit L3 and you switch circle and L3, all of your boosts will be on the face. And then when you hit L3, that's when you just kind of enter your quicker move mode. And then you're not making that error, because I was talking to John. I'm like, John, I don't know what's going on, but at times I am boosting into the face of an enemy I'm trying to stay away from, and I'm losing my mind. And John's like, you're just squeezing the controller too tight. And it turns out, unfortunately, John was right.
Yeah, John's very smart.
And once I switched that, way easier.
And so we had exchanged text messages, and you said on that first boss, eventually you just had to wail on it with your sword. And like, I beat the helicopter the first time this run through. I played this game to a degree before, and I beat it on the first time. I'm like, Brian must not mean the first helicopter. And so I get to Baltreus.
Oh yeah, he wrecked me.
I get stuck, and I'm like, oh, well, this is the end of the game for me. Well, that's kind of sad. I'm like, well, Brian said the sword worked on this guy. So I, after about 100 attempts, hyperbole, maybe it was 50, I just got really aggressive. I got up in his face with his sword, like full-on bull rush mode. I'm like, oh, and I finally beat him with the sword. It's like, oh, thanks for that tip, Brian. And it turns out we weren't even on the same page.
No, I didn't use the sword. I used double SMGs and the Singer missiles. So I stayed close, put a lot of damage on them, and then blew them up.
So the reason why you have that fight before the tutorial is because it's an easy fight, right? Sorry, Brian. It's an easy fight. You were just playing completely wrong, right? Yeah, maybe you got caught by like the invisible wall or this or that. But if they put something before the tutorial like that, to me, that's like, hey, we're preparing you for what's to come to some degree. It's not going to be a cakewalk, but you can take care of that, like with that initial, because you don't even like have your build yet, right? It's like a core build when you start out. It's like, here you go, here's your mech, and it's some very basic stuff. And if you use what they've given you correctly, right? Hey, look, just run up and smack that. If you do smack the helicopter with the sword, you win, right?
But he
And
kept pulling back, and I couldn't get to him, and he would repeatedly do that. He just backs up away from you.
I don't know. I never had that problem. I just got up right up. I was just like, all right, I have a sword. I guess they want me to use it. I'm gonna get super close and just smack. And I just destroyed that thing and got right into the tutorial. Right.
So get this, John. I played that tutorial a second time because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go through the things the second time. I've clearly learned how to play this game. I died to it another 4 times.
So there's
something.
There's something about that boss's movement, man. It's just like sometimes you run into a wall, and unfortunately, you ran into a wall on like one of the easier bosses in the game, right?
Yeah, this thing's got my number.
And I do get like oftentimes with FromSoft, you run into that massive like insane boss right away, and it kills you, and then that's what's supposed to happen, right? And it doesn't here. You just die. So it is. I can see where you'd be frustrated if you were stuck on him, right? I'm glad you eventually beat him and got through that to the tutorial. So then you could go ahead and like actually learn and be like, oh, I see what this is.
So Brian, did you beat it because you wanted to beat it, or did you beat it so that we didn't have another Tales from the Borderlands situation for the podcast?
I liked the fluidity of how the gameplay was working up to that point. So I was like, dude, I got to get through this. And then eventually I did beat it. And I'm like, well, maybe it's because there's times it's just me, right? Where it's just like, okay, your brain doesn't work around this thing. And I went to Reddit, I looked up Armored Core and first boss. There's just thread after thread. Why is this so hard? Is this beatable? What is going on? Why can't I beat this? Like, it was apparently a common thing. But it's FromSoft, and we ran into that with other games. But there are times that we do some of this stuff for the podcast that I wind up loathing what we've done. Tales of the Borderland is well documented. And there's times that I'm really happy that we did.
How can you loathe something that you didn't play,
really
Brian?
Happy. So what?
Sorry, I put my punchline over you. How can you loathe something you didn't play, Brian?
Dude, I put in 20 minutes of a QuickTime event, and I was done. That's it. I told you, if gameplay is bad, I have no interest in finding a story if gameplay is bad. And Borderlands doesn't even have gameplay. That doesn't even qualify.
Yeah, we'll play it on the next Nerd Night. But coming back to my original question, John, you're generally a fan of FromSoft games. Like, fan of Armored Core? Does it fit within their catalog, or was this a weird one-off thing for you?
Yeah, I like the change of pace that they've brought with this, right? I mean, what you kind of lose in exploration, you get to switch over with like that quick, like fast-paced structure that just kind of lets you jump in and out, right? And I really like that. It kind of fit to have like a little bit of a lighter game. It wasn't like this massive, like, okay, I'm going to sit down and like I have to figure out the pathing and like all these options and like stats and like what's my build, and like it shifted into a different way where there was less pressure, right? It was great though to see them take that and then mix that with the same tools for like boss battles and storytelling. Right? Like this is totally a FromSoft game when it comes to story. And I loved that. Like very light kind of, you're picking up clues with like the guys that are talking and maybe reading a few things on like, licenses you pick up. So I like that. To me, it's not a Bloodborne, right? Or Elden Ring from like the impact it has in like my favorite games of all time, but it's been a lot of fun.
Let me stop you on the story for a second. Because like FromSoft delivers these awesome open world games generally that the story is a convoluted mess. In this game, there's actually like characters that are like telling you things that are relevant to what you're doing and what's going on. I think the storytelling is just way above where the other FromSoft games are, at least in their effort. I don't think it's necessarily super duper interesting where I'm at in midway through chapter 4, but I think it's a much more cohesive effort than we usually get from Software.
Definitely different than Sekiro for sure. Sekiro and this are, I think, a little bit different.
I would agree. It's not your like. I didn't have to go watch a YouTube tutorial about the lore to understand what was happening with the lore, like I normally do with other FromSoft games. It is much more of a straightforward story. But it's more in how the story gets delivered. Right, to me, feels kind of FromSofty, where it's not this like straight up, you have to pay attention a little bit. You're picking up clues throughout the world on certain things, and the way that they do bosses and tie bosses into the story, I thought was really, really cool with how like some of the machines and some of the things you fight are a part of this world and why they're there.
Yeah. No, that's very sensible. Mike, we'll turn to you. I don't know if you've played the entire FromSoft catalog because they put out like 100 games, but I know that you're a hardcore FromSoft fan. So, like, did you enjoy their approach to the Armored Core formula with the more like structured mission combat or mission structure?
I did. I mean, this is my first Armored Core game. Even back in the PS1 days when Armored Core was FromSoft's big series, I always knew them as the dark fantasy guys from like Evergrace and Otage, things like that. I never got into the original Armored Cores back in the PS1 days, so this was a departure for me, and I was shocked at how much I enjoyed this game.
I was shocked
Because
by
I'm
how
not
much.
a mech game guy either. I played Mech Warrior 2 back in the 90s on the PC. That's pretty much about it.
I was shocked by how much I enjoyed this game because we talked on one of the shows in 2023. I think it was towards the end of the year because we were talking about our games of the year, and you said that Armored Core was arguably your favorite game of the year. I'm like, what? That weird mech thing? Like, I was very surprised that that's how it got on my radar, and that's why we're now talking about it today because since we had that discussion, I'm like, oh, I should check that game out. And now I've checked it out. It's pretty good.
Amazing combat. Their combat in this game is it is so fun and so someone's used the word fluid, and that's perfect for this. It's a ballet of explosions that just is constantly moving and shifting, and whether you're winning or losing can change almost instantly if you make a mistake or if you make a good move and catch an enemy by surprise. And every fight feels important, and every fight feels cool when you win. And it's staggering how well executed the combat is in this game.
That's what makes me think of Sekiro, right? It's the same kind of thing. Sekiro was just everything was so fluid, and it's very different, but it makes you feel like you're actually in a real fight.
I think the one thing about it is I want more, right? So like the missions, like the one thing that's unique about this game to me from a FromSoft standpoint is like you have some missions where like you just go in and you're just like, hey, just like take the wall or wipe out these enemies or this or that. It has it felt very much to me like an old Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era game called like Desert Strike. There's just Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, where like you're this helicopter and you're going in and like you're like rescuing people in like kind of like a top-down attack copter, right? But it had this like, oh, go attack here, and like this mission structure that just reminded me of that. And I wanted more of those missions. Like to me, even if you like, I mean, the boss battles are cool, but I wanted more of like, okay, we're gonna work together with these other Armored Core units, and let's go in and take out this base or do this, do that. Those were kind of some of the funner missions to me, where you were going through and just fighting a bunch of the non-big mechs, because it was just fun to like do that arcadey blast around with your jets and zoom over here and jump up on a building and shoot down on these guys over here and then like shoot your Macross missiles all over the place, right? And just do that all the time. So like I really liked those missions, and some of them were super short where it's like I just pop in, shoot a bunch of stuff, and I played for 15-20 minutes. That's awesome. Okay, I feel like I want to do that again. Give me another one of those missions where I'm just like an awesome like mech guy that's blowing stuff up, right?
That was the part that was so crazy. Some of the missions are like literally 5 minutes. Oh, you got here, you did the thing, done. I'm like, what? But it takes away something from FromSoft I don't like. And John, you said it perfectly. The pressure. Elden Ring and Bloodborne and even Sekiro to a certain degree have pressure. You're always at the risk of dying as you push forward. Because of the single level mission structure of this thing, it removes that. And I think that made this more of an enjoyable experience for me than others.
No, I totally agree. And like those other games, like the Souls-like games, like you have your stack of souls, you die, they drop on the ground. And if you don't get back there and touch them and reclaim them, they're gone forever. And like I agree, I didn't realize how much that pressure factored into my FromSoft enjoyment. So like, great point, Brian.
Yeah, and it even goes to like the missions themselves will have a checkpoint system in them, so it's very, very forgiving to where look, as long as you have enough like gear, like weapons and this and that purchased, right? Because you can't purchase new stuff once you're in a mission, but you can always say, I'm at the boss now, my build got me here, but my build is not set to beat this boss. There's no way I'm going to beat him. Not going to happen with this build. And you can just go in and you can say, all right, let me change my entire mech around, right? And then try something new. And like once I realized that's how flexible it was, like, yeah, no pressure. Like, oh, okay, great. I'm at the boss. And all right, I'm going to go ahead and play around with all these different builds to try and take this boss down. And like, it made me then change how I like purchased gear and this and that before going into missions. Because it's like, okay, I want to make sure that I have enough stuff to do 2 or 3 different build types so that I don't have to replay the entire mission.
I love that. Do you think that altering your strategy is the highlight of the core gameplay loop for you, John?
Yeah, pretty much, right? Although I usually stick with one strategy, and we'll talk about that. But like, yeah, like it's basically going through, beating the mission, or like going through the mission until like you realize I'm stuck, and then unlocking the puzzle of, oh, well, what is this boss doing, right? And what does he have as far as defense and offense, and then figuring out which build you want to pick to counter that.
Yeah, generally the key is a flamethrower. I found that is the best tool for every situation. Mike, what do you think is the highlight of the core gameplay loop?
Well, I think you've captured it. I think it is the flexibility. You can do anything. There are so many options. There's so many weapons of so many different types, and you can rearrange things almost infinitely. So however you want to play close up, do it. You want to play medium, do it. Long range, do it. If you want to have all missiles, do it. You know, if you want to be mostly about punching people in the face, sure, why not? The game lets you fight how you feel comfortable fighting. And it's not that hard to earn money if you need to buy a few new parts, so you can always be switching things up. There's just infinite variety of choice that you can tailor your core to what you like to do.
Yeah, after I finish Chapter 4, I'm going to go flamethrower on the right hand, plasma flamethrower on the left hand. I'm going to be all flames all the time, and it's going to be awesome. It'll be a little sad to give up the sword and the bazooka, but I'll be okay. Brian, is there something for you that stands out about the core gameplay loop besides the combat?
The customization, and this is where we talk about how there's threads that you can feel from FromSoft that are very FromSoft. The Elden Ring, to this day, one of the things about Elden Ring I think is just so fascinating, and Elden Ring was maybe the most extreme example of this among FromSoft, is just how many different builds are entirely viable in Elden Ring. How many weapons are viable, how many spells are viable, how much variation you can do, that in a lot of ways, because like sometimes a problem that we run into in video games is we find a meta. The meta is the meta, and then everybody just does the same thing. But in Elden Ring, there's a billion different ways that you can play this, and they can all be very overpowered depending on your build. That is a little bit of what I felt like with building the mech. It is uncomfortable how many options there are to build your mech. And if you really want to go into like understanding like how much energy you need, how much load bearing you need, which affects your legs, your targeting system, which can affect of what ranges you're so good at. You have 2 different shoulder weapons, and you can have 2 different handheld weapons. So and then even later on, you can unlock things where you can have hand weapons on your shoulders. It's overwhelming almost how many different kinds of ways that you can play this game, which can be kind of daunting for me. So actually, I just made a very strong mid-range build, a very strong close-range build, and I just kind of fluctuate between the two as that's needed, and that's gotten me all the way here. But what I also learned later on is that if you find a build that, say someone posted a build on YouTube you like, it'll list to code. You can put the code into your system, and then what it does is it takes all the pieces and puts that build together for you, and then you just have their build and you can try that. And I mean, if you want to tinker, this is a game where you could lose an absurd amount of time by customizing what you want to do. So, like, for me, I'm not quite that way. I'm like, look, I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to try to work them as best as I can. And up to this point, I've gotten away with 2 mechs for everything. But I'm so wildly impressed with the amount of customization. It is just crazy.
It is wild. And quick on-air production note, we're going to swap the next 2 things that we're going to talk about. So, assuming that everyone listening is as amped up to get into Armored Core 6 as we are, next, we're going to give you some pro tips for updating your mech. As Brian said, the amount of options for building your mech is frankly overwhelming. So we're going to do our best to break it down for you. There's 12 core slots. 4 of them are weapons on your hands and shoulders. You have arms and legs, which dictate how much weight you can carry. You have a head that determines your auto-targeting for short, medium, and long range. You have generators and boosters and other internal hardware. All of this determines your hit points, how much damage you do, your speed, and your stability as you're flying around. You have to balance your total weight with energy. So, John, how long did it take for you to feel just comfortable customizing your mech?
So really quick, I felt like I knew what I was doing, right? For the most part. I spent some time kind of buying, selling weapons to figure out what I liked, but then I just stuck with that, right? And really, I mean, for the first part of the game, I was reverse legs, super fast, go bop around, and like stagger, sword, right? Like that was my whole shtick, is I just wanted to be like shoot a bunch of missiles until they're weak, and then dive in and attack with my sword and blow stuff up. And that got me through a majority of the beginning of the game, right? Once though that I progressed and things started to like make even more sense, I started to narrow that down. So I was like, oh, hey, I figured out like, yeah, I can lock on better if I get this head or this module, right? Or I want to unlock these OSTs so that I get, these weapons have a better, and OSTs are basically like additional like things you get outside of what Tom mentioned. That's just like additional upgrades. So you can be like, I want to unlock to have, instead of having shoulder missiles, you can have shoulder hand weapons. So like Tom, you're talking about, I got 2 flamethrowers and you don't want to give up like the sword. You can unlock the loading bay and you can sacrifice one of your shoulder weapons for a sword. And then when you press your shoulder weapon, it just switches it does like a switch where like now my left hand, instead of being a flamethrower, is my sword again.
Quick clarification. Does that drop your flamethrower on the ground so it's gone and no longer accessible? I did not understand the utility of that.
Yes. So like at one point, there is one boss at one point where I was like, my swords were not working, and you get you get this really, really cool weapon at one point that work. Like, I'm not going to talk about you get this really awesome weapon at one point. I was like, I'm going to put 2 of these on. Like, I basically had both those on my shoulder. And then like, but I wanted to have one that would drop. Like, I don't know, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. And like, I think just the more and the deeper you would get into it, the more you understand. So it really is like a FromSoft game where the more you give, right, the more you get, and you just kind of gradually learn. And then also on top of what Brian was saying, we haven't talked about the arena yet, but another cool thing that I started doing that helped me understand was I looked at, once you like beat some of the arena bots, right, you also get their loadout. So you could go and you could look at their loadouts and you're like, oh, that's how they built that bot I just fought. Cool, I want to try that out, right? But for the most part, I'm like, I like to be fast. I like to be nimble in most things that I do. So like, I just picked one name for like head, body, legs, and arms, and then picked the weapons I want. And that did really well for me for most of the game.
Another quick question for you. I know Brian has something that he wants to say, but do you look at guides, John, or did you just tinker and figure things out on your own?
I always go and like I'll hit up YouTube like if I'm not understanding something. This game though, I will say more often than other ones. Like normally I'll be like, give me the like Diablo, right? If there's a million options, I'm like, give me the best build that gets me to where I want to go and do the fun things I want to do. On this, I did actually just like, because I want like all the weapons play a little different. I started to actually tinker myself a lot when I was in those scenarios where like, oh shoot, I'm on this boss and I know I don't have the right weapon. Let me go ahead and tinker with my build myself. So a lot of times I'd get like that solid base from someone like, oh, this is a good like build between like arms and this and that lets you like do what you need to do. And then I'd pick the weapons I wanted to use.
FromSoft also made a decision here that was, and they could have not have, but they made a decision to really promote us wanting to really customize. Whatever you buy, you can sell back for the exact same amount that you bought it for. And that seems like a very small thing, but when you have this many options, that is a really critical decision that made it a better overall experience because it lets you get to try everything. Oh, I got 3 or 4 things I'm not even using. Sell them back, buy the new things. If 2 of those new things suck, sell those back, try something else. And it just lets you experiment freely without worrying about FOMO.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. I hoard everything that they give you because it's all right-handed weapons. I'm like, oh, well, I will try things on my right hand, and I'm only going to buy things that I truly believe in with my left hand. Or like with shoulders, I'll alternate which one I'm buying. So like, it's interesting. I don't have a lot of symmetry with my builds, but I have a crap load of right-handed weapons.
Yeah, sell. Right? If you're like I hate the dagger, I don't like the dagger, I'm never like sell, right? Because one thing that we didn't talk about is you do sometimes find weapons throughout the world. There is a little bit of exploration. You can find chests and unlock weapons, and like as you do, like get badges and weapon and like get like tags or whatever it is from like mechs, that will unlock some equipment as well. So, but like, yeah, there's no reason to hold on to it if you need cash. Go ahead and sell it. Like, I'll oftentimes, if I was working on a build, I was like, oh shoot, I don't have enough energy. I need a different generator because what I got isn't putting out enough power, right? So sell, and then great. Now I can go buy this $400,000 generator so that I got enough power.
So when I got stuck on Baltreus, I ran out of money for like buying different components to try, and like he's behind another mini boss that wasn't super easy with Sula. And so I have gotten into this habit where I just hoard cash now. Like I have all my right-handed weapons, and like I'm just hoarding cash for when I hit another wall. I'm like, well, I'm going to have the flexibility to buy literally everything. So I'm glad that I'm just making this experience more painful for myself than I need to.
Buy whatever you want, man. Your money is a total that is always going up, right? It never goes down. The only time you lose money that you can't get is if you like respec your OSTs, right? That costs like 50,000. It's nothing. Or you can actually lose money in a mission, right? Mm-hmm. And one mission I did, and I forget what it was, but like I did it so poorly or however it was, I lost like 20 grand because I had to restart a bunch of times or something. And like, yeah, and you didn't make enough money in it. So every time it's usually not that punishing, right? But you can lose money on a mission, which I thought was funny.
That was my one detriment against my dual miniguns, which are just absurd. You hold down the trigger and you let them go forever. And then at the end, like I was pretty low on funds and I was just dinking around. I owed like 50 grand. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I came out in the negative.
Yeah, you spent a lot of money on ammo. I like the miniguns as well, right? That Gatling gun is pretty sweet.
Mike, did you want to jump in with a point?
I did want to mention that there's a subtle thing that you can learn to do eventually is working out the timing of your 4 weapons, because they have different times as far as like reload, different levels of ammo. Some of them have a cooldown. So you kind of want to mix and match your weapons in that sense. So you kind of want to be able to bunch certain attacks together and time it so that you can wear down a shield or, wear down to the point of stunning them and then hammer them with something heavy at that point. So like a weapon like the flamethrower or the minigun is great to pair with a slower, longer, cooldown type shoulder weapon, because you can fire the minigun or the flamethrower for a long time continuously, unlike a shotgun, for example, or like the I love the Songbird shoulder-mounted cannons, but after you fire those things, it's going to be a little while until you can fire them again. So you can't just keep hammering them continuously. But if you fire them and then you go to your minigun or flamethrower for a bit until they come back, you can really kind of be constantly putting pressure on if you balance your weapon timing.
I was messing around with somebody's build with those, it's like the plasma shots or the microwave emitter things. And if you've got shoulder-mounted ones and hand ones, you put them up on your shoulder as they're cooling down, and then you pull up the other 2 in your hands. It's broken. Like, you can... I used it maybe a mission, and then I had to stop because I'm like, okay, this trivializes the game. So people can do some pretty nutty stuff.
I want to trivialize things. It's interesting that you said that, Mike, because my go-to hand options are flamethrower on the right and bazooka on the left. So bazooka is my big shield breaker, and then for my shoulders, I have found a homing missile that fires 3 missiles on one side, and then a plasma launcher on the other side. They both recharge really quickly and they both lock on really quickly. So I am constantly holding down R2 for my flamethrower. I am hitting L2 endlessly to get my bazooka to fire as quickly as possible, and then I'm feathering in my R1, L1 to keep the pressure on with the missiles as much as possible.
Yep, that's exactly what I mean. You can balance out your weapon choices in such a way as to really maximize your, offensive firepower options in many, many different ways. Personally, I have found a hard time getting away from songbirds just because they're so much fun, but there are a ton of great options regardless, whichever way you want to do it.
90% of my playthrough was songbirds and sword. That was it, man. Like just songbirds, just so much fun because I will say all of the weapons have weight.
Yep.
Like you feel when you shoot a grenade, when you shoot like a big missile, like the delay that you have when you're in a light build, it makes you strategic when you do it. And when you hit something like with that big, it's such a good feeling where you're like, I timed it right. He swung right into where I was shooting. I fire those songbirds, those big rockets shoot out of your shoulders. They hit the guy, he's stunned, and you just charge in and like use like your plasma sword to do 2 charged hits, and you just watch that boss's like health bar drop in half. It's like, oh, that was awesome, right? And then you run away.
The plasma sword is awesome. For most of the game, like I enjoyed having a light build and zipping all over the place, but you come to one mission, I think it's in chapter 4, where you have to ascend down this cylindrical tunnel.
Oh,
you have
God.
to go down, and like there's this automated defense weapon down at the bottom just hammering you with these big lasers and all of this. And like I was trying to be very strategic and pick where to fly down to next and be very strategic about it. I'm like, I died a good 10 times there. I'm like, this isn't working. So what would be the opposite of this strategy? And I went in and I looked at everything that I'd purchased, and I just attached all of the heaviest stuff that I had, literally my tank tread legs and my heaviest arms and like all that. And I just like, can I sink like a rock to the bottom of this thing? And I could. And like I popped my pulse shield and just rocketed down to the bottom and then just lit them up from beneath. I'm like, oh, well, that was a super satisfying conclusion to this problem that was really vexing me. And as a side note, I kept that same build all the way through chapter 4. And now I'm on the final boss of chapter 4. I'm like, oh, I've had a lot of fun playing as a tank.
I had that same problem where I was like trying to be strategic, but it wasn't working. I'm like, okay, where do I go next? The time I beat it, I'm like, screw it. I'm going to go to the middle, drop down to those middle platforms relentlessly, boosting down. And that's how I beat it. It was the most brain dead approach to dropping down that silo, but that's the one that worked.
It's funny to me, right, that like so many times when like I couldn't figure out a solution, the solution was big giant tank. That was my solution. like I just need big giant tank to beat this, and that would be like I should make my build. It literally is like the heaviest stuff I can, and as many big rockets as I can put on my guy. It's big giant tank, and I'm like, all right, it's time for big giant tank. I'm tired of this guy, and then like I would eventually just pummel stuff with big giant tank.
Yeah,
John, your America's showing.
I mean, Big Giant Tank is fun. It's so slow, and like I have to do the boost maneuver just to get momentum moving in a direction. I can't believe that I almost beat the boss at the end of chapter 4 on my first try. Like I got it down to like this much, and like then she wiped me, and then I never got that close again with Big Giant Tank. I'm like, oh, well, let's put PS4 into rest mode, and let's try this again tomorrow after we've slept. That seems like the best way to approach this problem. Moving on from mech building to side content, the side stuff is rather limited in Armored Core. There are hidden licenses defined on each board. That could be fighting a different type of mech or finding like a destroyed mech hidden somewhere on the board. There are 1v1 arena battles against NPCs, and then there's an online mode where you can play either 1v1 against other real people or 3 versus 3 online battles. Mike, was this a satisfying amount of content in the total package of Armored Core?
I would like there have been more arena options. I love the arena. I love going in against arena fights and all the various mechs they throw at you, especially because the ones you meet in the game in many respects. And I had a great time going in there and seeing, somebody from a mission that I just played against in the arena and get to one-on-one them. And I would have loved to see more of that. I never tried the online mode. I did like going in and finding the secret hidden fights, because there's more of them than you think if you fully explore. There's more hidden core fights than you would have ever thought, because the missions kind of keep you on a fairly linear path, but there are hidden fights scattered in some of the larger levels, which add a lot of fun. But yeah, I probably could use more of that.
Yeah, I really like the arena battles too, right? They also kind of bring some of that hidden lore in there, right? As you're like, because it's a combination of these mechs that you are experiencing throughout the game, right? The people that you're working with and fighting against, right? But then there's also just some just random mechs. And I do wonder, like, I bet if you look at some of the mechs that you find that are like already dead in the water, I wonder if there's some of those. I just made that connection. I do think one thing that would be really cool that I just thought of too is like, Final Fantasy Rebirth, like the new Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, they do a good job with like giving you some really cool boss fights that just exist in like that combat arena mode. And it would be cool if they brought in like, let me fight some other FromSoft bosses with this giant mech. Like, I'd pay for that DLC, right? Like, that would be fun. But yeah, I do like things. Yeah, it'd be awesome. The other thing that was fun is they do kind of have like a score chase a little bit where you can like rank on all the levels you've beaten, which is cool because you can like go back in and like change your build and beat it again. Or if you want to go look for those hidden mechs, you kind of like there's one there that you haven't found, right? So it's a little bit like when you like play a Mario level and you finish the level and you see like, oh man, I didn't get all of the stars or I didn't get this. So then you can like just go back, select just that level and go through and try and find that and like try and get the best score or find a different path to like, basically speed run it. So that was fun too.
Yeah, also like Mario, like when you get stuck on a really hard boss, you can go back to that level, you can complete it as quickly as possible and grind out some cash so you can buy a new flamethrower to take on the boss. Like, very similar.
Mario's famous flamethrower.
I appreciated replaying levels early on to like earn some more cash so I could buy more stuff to load out, because there were certain missions that I liked. I found out which ones I could beat the most efficiently in like the first 2 chapters, and like I just kept doing those. And I was like, all right, well, now I have some more options. Now let's go try this thing. Let's go try Baltreas one more time. Maybe Brian's sword trick will work. Brian,
I don't know why I told you to use a sword, because that's not even what I did.
Yeah, no, I misinterpreted when you said the first boss. I'm like, that helicopter's pretty easy.
Okay,
so
never mind. That makes sense now. Okay.
Clearly he means Baltreas. Brian, were you happy with all of the stuff in this package? Because like you like a big, full, erect package, right?
I know I like a full, girthy package. Ever since I was young. It's interesting. The game, I thought, is satisfying to me in the sense that I like how the single player missions are, and they are enough for me that I don't feel like a lot needed to get added. I'm sure that you could derive a lot of fun by doing some of this online. Kind of, is it the Nest? What do they call it?
Yeah, it's called the Nest.
The Nest. Yeah. And I'm sure I could derive some fun, but to be honest, I'm not super interested in doing 1v1s and stuff like that. The story mode, for me, between the story mode and the stupid amount of customization, that creates enough flexibility, enough different experiences within that tight package alone. That's enough for me. I didn't really need a lot more. I did like the arena. I thought that was cool. The arena was nice because, like John had mentioned, you get a chance to kind of see how other builds work. But it was also fun just to kind of do some one-on-ones and just get some quick cash and then use those upgrades to kind of further develop what you're doing with your mech. So it's not an overly robust amount of, I think, experience, but I think that they do drill the core experience so extensively that I think it was enough to sate me for what I wanted.
Yeah, if you put like 100 hours or more into Elden Ring, you're not going to get that in this package. Like, I'm something like 20-ish hours in, and I'm at the end of chapter 4 out of 5 chapters. So, like, there is a mechanic where they want you to replay through the game multiple times, but, like, it's a much smaller, more contained thing. I think it's interesting that I, of all people, am the only one that tried the online combat in this thing. So I went into the Nest. I did play 2 one-on-one battles. I won the first match is a best of 3. I won the very first one, and then I got swept in the next 4 against the same person. It is very difficult to find a match. This game has only been out for 2 years, 3 years, 2 years. And, like, it's a long wait to get into a match. It's like, I got into those 2 matches. It was the same person back to back, and then I wouldn't change my loadout. I tried to get back in. No match. It's like, oh, wait around for a couple minutes and just like, all right, well, I'd rather just go do an arena fight than sit here waiting to get my butt kicked by another person. So I think it's really interesting and cool that there was the option for 3v3 battles, but I cannot imagine that there's actually anyone like out there willing to take on a new team of 3v3 mechs.
Yeah.
On the Armored Core subreddit, because anytime that I have a new game I'm playing, I'll get on the subreddit just to learn some different stuff. They still actively host tournaments. They've got a Discord server that they do, and then like once a month they basically just get groups together and that's what they do. So I think you're probably looking at more of the dedicated fan base. Even after probably a year, it was the diehards that were still there. So the fact that you were able to find somebody and beat them, Tom, that's awesome, because maybe that guy was playing for the first time, but with how long it's been out, that I would assume that's a person with some battles underneath their belt at least.
Yeah, I mean, we both started at the lowest rank. I played a ranked match against them. I wish that I'd had my flamethrower build then, because I feel just a lot more comfortable and confident. And like, now I just throw a big giant tank at them and see if they could get through my armor. It's like, well, if you can, you deserve to win, my friend. The last thing I want to talk about in Armored Core 6 is the story. You play as Pilot 621, an augmented human piloting your custom mech. Your handler, Walter, sends you on missions with and against different corporations and factions. In the first half of the game, you frequently flip sides between the different corporations. The corporations are fighting over this resource called coral, a mysterious, energy-rich substance found on Rubicon 3. You fight a series of other armored cores and the occasional super boss or monstrosity. Brian, let's talk about our impressions of the story, because we're the two who haven't seen credits yet, and then John and Mike can layer on their spoiler-free thoughts on top of that. So, Brian, how did the story grab you through the first, 3.5 chapters out of 5?
So, going into a FromSoft game, sometimes it's a little bit of trepidation about okay, is this going to be a story where I have to legitimately work and research to find a story? Or is this something where it's going to be more given to me, like we had mentioned with Sekiro? It's more given to you. I don't think that there's anything really gripping about it, or anything that was like, oh my gosh, this is really intense and really drawn in. It's a pretty basic story. Hey, we've got this. You are a nameless, augmented 4th generation pilot made to fight these mechs. You get exposed to coral, this stuff that's used to increase data transfers and uses an energy source for starships. It's spice, essentially, right? This is spice from Dune. And then the coral talks to you. So, okay, now I'm learning some things about, this voice is talking to me. Am I hallucinating? Am I not hallucinating? You're going to work for a whole bunch of corporations, which apparently are just fine when each corporation hires you against... you just worked for this guy. Now, this other guy has hired you to screw over your previous boss. Now, in the next mission, that guy is like, hey, you blew up my plant, but now I'm going to hire you to go blow up some other guy's plant. So that part was kind of confusing, how everyone just lets bygones be bygones because you're a mercenary and God knows you don't have any control over what you're doing. It's okay. I don't know. If a 1 is, a terrible game and 10 is the most amazing story you've ever heard, it's a 5. I think it's fascinating, though, that is it Vita Vea? There's a gentleman who's really famous on YouTube for doing a lot of the lore of Elden Ring, Bloodborne. He has a 5-hour and 40-minute video on the lore of Armored Core 6. 5 hours and 40 minutes. I don't know if there's enough story to constitute what that video is there for the duration. And I've watched some different videos just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And what I said is, I think for the most part, an accurate summarization of what's happening. So I think it's okay. I don't think it's in this game, the gameplay is pushing me to keep going because the gameplay is so damn good. So the story doesn't really matter to me. So it's just okay.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say it's pretty okay. I'm slightly higher on it than you. Like, I'd say like a 6 out of 10 in the story. But what I appreciate is the more linear delivery than other FromSoft games that I played. Like, I appreciate that there are characters that are talking to me, giving me a briefing on this mission that I'm going to, and then occasionally talking to me on the mission. So, like, I really appreciate the delivery. So, question for John and for Mike. You've seen the credits. Does this story pay off in a satisfying way? Or is it just all about blowing things up?
Oh, no. I think the issue you guys are at is that your synopsis of the story is correct as far as 621 knows. But 621 does not know everything at this point. There are layers of complexity here. There are motivations. There are things happening below the surface that you don't know. And as you go to the end, and especially if you go through another playthrough, you dive deeper below the surface and a lot of this becomes more clear, and the story becomes so much a different thing then than it is to you now that I think it would change your opinion quite a bit. It's just you don't have the information to know where the story is actually going because 621 doesn't have the information.
So, Mike,
you are dealing with a hidden story.
And Mike, I'm going to ask you something kind of spoilery, but I'm going to try to be cryptic about it so it's not super spoilery for someone who hasn't started playing the game yet. In subsequent playthroughs, are you still 621 or is there a different call sign?
You are 621.
Okay. Well, that's interesting to me. Brian, did you have a question that you wanted to ask there?
Yeah, I was gonna ask two things. So one, Mike, how many New Game Pluses did you do? And two, I read, so I think it's 3 playthroughs for the full thing, and isn't it like 50? It's 15 to 20 additional missions on New Game Plus. It's absurd how much more there is. Like it's almost the second half of the game.
In some ways, yes. And I went through one New Game Plus. There were other games that were calling to me by that point, so I was willing to, at some point I'd like to go through and actually do that, but there's always other games I want to play, so eventually that just kind of pulls me away. But yeah, there's a lot of new path that becomes clear to you once you go through the next time, and apparently the next time. That just doesn't exist the first time through. So I compared it to Nier once before, and I think that's the closest comparison of how the story is structured, where you don't really know what's happening, and you just don't have the ability to visualize what's happening on your first playthrough, especially until you get very far into it. And there's just a lot more depth that becomes clear, the next time through and the next time through as they unveil what's actually going on to you.
John, do you appreciate this approach to how they deliver the narrative? Because I, for one, I do not replay games, so maybe I'll play this a second time through, knowing that it unlocks more of it. But 3 times through the same game, that's a tall order for me. Do you feel differently?
I see your point, and I would agree with you probably about 80%. I think it's a unique thing you can do if done right. Right? And if made clear that, hey, look, we're resetting the time, is it very, very clear, yep, we're resetting, and now you get a chance to go again, but to do it different, and from what I've played, it doesn't kind of do that yet, right? You just have to kind of know, hey, this time around is going to be different for whatever reason. And maybe they do explain that. I haven't played into New Game Plus more than the first mission, so maybe they do explain that more. I would rather see, if they do something like that, to where I like it more where you have one story, and maybe, you were saying, hey, maybe when New Game Plus, you're not playing as 621. Maybe you're coming back as someone else, and that's giving you more of the insight. To me, that is what I like more, where it's multiple vantage points to the same story, and you can then unlock more or change pathings based upon playing as someone else.
John, is it the same difficulty level?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I would imagine going through the story subsequent times it would be a lot faster.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely clear the better we get at this game, you blow through some of these missions fast.
Yeah, you could definitely, I've played and replaying some even just the normal missions without New Game Plus. You're you're built. You just even have better equipment, right?
Yeah.
Look, there's more and more equipment that unlocks near the end of the game, and you're still unlocking more things as you're doing, special licenses and this and that, so that, yeah, you can really put a hurt on a lot of those first few missions, right? And you know what to do, right? This is going to be the cleaner, so I need to make sure I just build this build out, and I'm going here and I'm going to destroy the cleaner, right? I mean, I've destroyed the cleaner so many times at this point, right? I can do it with my eyes closed, right? So,
Mike, did you want to add a point?
I was just going to say, I'm surprised you said the cleaner, because that's one I don't much care for. I would never really want to keep killing the cleaner. I like to kill the pilot trainee guy, just to hear him say his last lines as I kill him. I have to kill that guy 50 times.
I just want to call sign up my own, Mike.
He was definitely he was definitely the one I farmed. I felt bad. That was get close, shove a singer up his rectum and let it go. Like that guy got detonated.
Well,
and then I would just come back and murder him again.
Right? He's a brother of he's the brother, I think, of one of the ones you're friendly with on
Rusty.
I think
it's not Rusty.
It might be Rusty. I can't remember, but he is the younger brother of one of the other pilots. He was supposed to be G13. And you not only do you kill him, you take his call sign going forward. That's how bad you hammer this poor kid.
That's what he gets.
I do think that's one thing we haven't really touched on about the story, right? Is the characters, right? So, like, they do a really good job of giving a lot of these other mechs and pilots that you're around great personalities, right? And like, depending upon the choices you make in the game, like it plays out great. Like, you guys are coming into the end, and when I feel like when we come back for part 2 of this discussion, you guys are going to have a different outlook on the story.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe not like drastic. Like, it's not going to go to like, this is a 10 and the best FromSoft game ever, but you guys are kind of literally mid on the story, right? And I think it might move up to more of the 7-8 range for you as you continue on.
I will keep an open mind, because I do plan to try to get into New Game Plus by the next time that we do this.
Yeah, you gotta stop playing Monster Hunter.
Kind of what I'm shooting for. Oh my god! So because I got sick, I put in, since Monster Hunter came out on the 28th, I've put in 62 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, I haven't put in 62 hours of gaming yet this year, and I have a gaming podcast.
I couldn't. I was so sick I couldn't move, but my thumbs very, 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 very lightning quick.
Yeah, you should have Casey teach you a secret technique. So, Mike, is Armored Core 6 a game that all FromSoft fans should play?
Yes. I know it's a very different game than most of their other, modern content. It's obviously not anything like Bloodborne or Elden Ring or games like that, but it has that FromSoft quality to it, where the more you do it, the more you get into it, the more rewarding it becomes. And it's just, there are moments in this game, and I'm saving some of this for part 2, but I will stand up and say there's a moment in this game that I think is one of the probably top 10 coolest gaming moments I've experienced in the last 10 years. That it amazes me how well they execute just great moments in gaming within this larger framework of the game. And it's beautiful.
Well, you just got me super amped for Chapter 5 and for New Game Plus. John, is this a game that all video game fans should play? Should everybody just play Armored Core?
This is a game, I feel like this is a game for fans of mechs and fast-paced combat, right? Like, that is, like, if you like giant robots and you like blowing stuff up but not button mashers, this is the one for you. I think there's a lot of crossover, right, with FromSoft games, and that most FromSoft game fans are going to find something they're going to like here too, right? So, like, if you like all types of games and you really like FromSoft, play it. But if you're looking for sword and board fantasy, right, turtling up and rolling out and, like, kind of the slower fights that you can kind of have within an Elden Ring or a Dark Souls, this may not be your cup of tea, right? I recommend everybody try it. Give it a shot. You can find it cheap, right? It's been out for a while. I think you're going to have, if you give it a little time, everybody can have a good time with it.
And Brian, what about your people? What about dude bro culture? Like, should all of Call of Duty players play this game?
Man, I didn't know I was representing such a diverse group of people. Um, Mike said it really well, where it is something where you may not realize it definitely it's a different kind of offspring of FromSoft, but like some of the core tenets are all there, right? It is fast, it is fluid, it is well put together, and it rewards you for like truly understanding the game. And then to kind of just talk about what John had talked about, like, yeah, I do agree that as mech lovers, they should play this. But I mean, if you just, again, something that's like John said it well, it's not a button masher, but it's fast, skill-based combat. And if you put a little bit of time being willing to learn how the mechanics of the game works, you get rewarded for it to such a degree that it's just so satisfying. And if you really want to, you can do not sword and board, but you can do like plasma shield and laser sword, and that's not that far off.
True, I guess.
Yeah, so it's kind of there. We just need to have patches. We need a call sign patches. So
there's a patches appearance in an earlier Armored Core, apparently.
I am not shocked. Guy's the unofficial mascot. But it's definitely worth playing. Again, I talk about all the time how I'm a gameplay oriented gamer, and the gameplay is polished as hell. So definitely give it a shot.
Yeah, it's a great game. There's a lot of stuff to like. I'm not a mech guy at all. I'm terrible at FromSoft games, although I generally enjoy them. And I really enjoy this game. I don't think it's going to be for absolutely everyone. Like, you have to have some interest in like fast-paced combat. Like, if you can't handle things like really flying at you, that's going to make this more challenging, but it is so satisfying to take down other mechs of different like shapes and builds. So, Bry Guy, what do you hope to get out of this game in the next month?
I think it's just trying to get into New Game Plus. Halfway through 4 right now, so I think Tom and I are pretty close. He's at the end of it. I'm at halfway through 4. But I want to try to get through 4, try to get through 5, and I know there's not a lot of chapters to either one. And then I'm going to try to do a hard push to see kind of how far I can get through New Game Plus. Kind of like speed running this thing. And it'll be interesting if I do get caught up on a boss that I wound up beating relatively easy. Or at least in a few number of tries. It's going to be interesting if I do get caught on something again, because maybe then I just had luck. But we'll tune in next month and we'll find out.
Yeah, I can't wait. John, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's time to dig into New Game Plus and maybe try a New Game Plus run. We'll see how other things kind of distract me. You know, I've already cleared the arena, so won all those fights, right? So really, it's going to be try and find all the licenses and try and see what new story beats I can get from at least one playthrough in New Game Plus.
Yeah, I also hope to make it through like one full New Game Plus playthrough. Mike, what are you excited to talk about on our part 2 episode without spoiling anything? Like, what has you fired up for the rest of our experience with this?
Well, I'm curious. There is a specific mission that I got in New Game Plus that I thought was by far the hardest mission of any mission-based game I've ever played. And I really struggled to finish it. Now, you guys seem to be savants who kind of are cruising through some of this stuff.
I'm not a savant. Really I struggle all the time.
Now, the ones who are good at it, I'm really curious if you guys get that mission, how you will do on it. Because, man, I barely scraped through that mission. It almost ended my New Game Plus run before the end, just because I wasn't sure I could finish that mission. I did, after way too many tries for failing, get through it, but it was a dog. And I'm just real curious if you guys will run into the same experience or if you'll just kind of crush it the way you seem to be crushing all this other stuff.
That will be interesting. What chapter is it in, Mike?
It's late. I believe it was like chapter 5 of New Game Plus. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but it's definitely a later chapter. And it's near the end of one of the later chapters.
Well, here's hoping that I even see it.
It's in a sense, it's optional because there are choices you get that affect the missions you get to end the game. And depending what choices you make, you might not get this particular mission. You'll get a different one.
I was just going to ask that because I know that if you side with certain corporations, it branches.
That's exactly it. Depends who you side with, when the choice comes.
Can you do us a favor though, and separately, can you shoot us to let us know what your choices were, so we can at least get there to try it?
I'll try to remember. I'll try to figure out what the path was. I'll just probably look it up and see what it was because I don't remember what it was. But I can do that. I'll put it in the Discord.
Oh, Brian's gonna have to look at Discord.
Well, if you don't want me to put in Discord, I can do it some other way. But that's what I was assuming.
Don't force me to be better about it.
No, I'll just drive you to Brian's house and you can like write a note and stick it to his forehead. So that is going to wrap up our first part of our discussion on Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon by From Software. We'll be back next month to wrap up this discussion. I hope you'll consider like picking up this gem of a game, jumping in and playing with us. Please support Outside is Overrated at patreon.com/OIO. That's patreon.com/OIO. Until next month, stay inside, kids.